Okay, in this presentation, I will introduce the new mesh type reference computational phantoms, and actually it's continuation of Dr. Maria Zhang's presentation, I think. This slide shows the computational phantoms which have been used by ICRP for those coefficient calculations, and the left one is one of the stylized phantoms used in the past. And the right ones are the Voxel phantoms. These are used these days, and these are the current ICRP reference computational phantoms for those coefficient calculations. And these phantoms are based on patient CT data, but it shows very good anatomy. But these phantoms do not include the detailed or structures if they are very thin or very fine, or if they are very, very small. So this issue was raised in 2013, and then we had a working group. We established a working group. Then eventually we established a task group in early 2016. That is to continue the work of the working group and to write report on this. And the objective of this task group 103 is to develop mesh type ICRP reference computational phantoms which have all the source and target tissues, including the details of the eyes and skin, and also including the detailed thin target tissues of the elementary and respiratory organs. And we are now talking about very thin layers, that those are 10 microns to 300 microns. This slide shows the current task group members. We have a very good combination. First, it's me and from Korea, and Dr. Yeon Soo-yeom. He is here now, and he's from my research team. And also we have Dr. Maria Zhang and Dr. Yina Petushians from Germany, and they are the ones who developed the current ICRP reference computation phantoms. We also have Professor Wesley Boltz and Dr. Junxing Lee, and they are the ones who developed pediatric phantoms. So we are all working together, and I think it's a very good combination. We also have Dr. Keith Ackerman from Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and also Professor Choi Roy from Tsinghua University, and Dr. John Pom-sun Chung is our anatomist, and he's working with some few more anatomists to support our research, our work. So now we are working on it. Actually, we have almost finalized our phantoms, and now at this point we are writing the report. And you can see the phantoms in the right hand side, and these phantoms are basically the exact replica of the Voxel phantoms. And the only difference is that these new mesh phantoms address the limitations of the current ICRP reference phantoms, and also provide some flexibility for future applications. This slide shows the male phantom developed in our task group. This is female phantom, and here you can see very thin target layer of the skin, and here you can see the 50 micron thin target layer. It is respiratory tract organs. In case of respiratory tract organs, you can see some number of layers, and to define these are to define the source regions and target region. This is lungs. It was already explained by Dr. Maria Zhang. It has very detailed structure, and is quite complicated indeed. This slide shows the Burton's eye models installed in the mesh phantom. These are the blood models in large arteries and veins, and the muscle models, lymphatic nodes. again, these are the MRCPs, and again, these are the replica of the current ICRP reference phantom, and provide very similar those values, those coefficient values. So we have developed the mesh phantoms, mesh type reference computational phantoms, and now I'll talk about some more topics. The first one is compatibility with the MC Monte Carlo code, and here I'll talk about the compatibility of the new mesh type reference computational phantoms with some general purpose Monte Carlo codes for those coefficient calculations. Then I'll talk about the dosimetry impact of new phantoms, and also those coefficients for industrial radiography sources. So we used these new phantoms to calculate those coefficients for some industrial radiography sources. First, it's about the compatibility of the new mesh phantoms, and here we implemented the new mesh phantoms into some general purpose Monte Carlo codes and compare the performance of these new mesh phantoms with the performance of the Voxel phantoms. So this is the mesh phantom. This is a mesh type reference computational phantom. This is male phantom, and then we voxelize this phantom with different voxel resolutions. The first one is 0.6 millimeter voxel resolution, then 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, and 4 millimeter voxel resolution. These are voxel phantoms, and this is also the voxel phantom, and this is the current voxel type reference computational phantoms released in publication 110. And then we implemented all these phantoms in Monte Carlo code and compare the performance of the mesh phantom with the other voxel phantoms. This first one is this is about memory requirement, and I will just focus on the mesh phantom, mesh type reference computation phantom, here MRCP, and we see the memory requirement is not very large, even though the complexity of the phantom, the memory requirement is about 14 gigabyte, and it should be fine because these days typical PC memory size is higher than this one. This is initialization time. Again, for the mesh phantom, initialization time is very short, less than few minutes, so it's almost ignorable. Now, this is computation speed. Computation speed is very important because we need to do a lot of calculations for those coefficients. And this slide compares the computation speed of mesh phantom with the voxel phantoms for Gent 4 code. Here, the computation speed is in the unit of particles per second, which means how many particles we can transport per each second. And here you can see the black line here. The black solid line is the computation speed of mesh phantom. There's new mesh phantom. And the other broken lines are the computation speed of voxel phantoms. And here, for Photon, you can see the computation speed of mesh phantom is comparable to the blue line, and blue line is the voxel phantom with 0.6 millimeter voxel resolution. And we can see about the same trend with neutron. But for electrons and helium, there's nothing I can say, but roughly I can say the speed of mesh phantom is just comparable to the speed of voxel phantoms with different resolutions. This slide shows the computation speed compares the computation speed of mesh phantom with voxel phantoms for PHITS code, and here we can see the computation speed of mesh phantom is faster. Mesh phantom is faster than the other voxel phantoms for all particles. It is even faster than the current ICRP reference computational phantoms, which are voxel phantoms with quite low voxel resolution. And this is quite good news because these days in ICRP, quite large portion of those coefficients are being calculated by PHITS code. So that means if you use mesh phantoms, the use of mesh phantoms can even improve computer speed of those coefficients in committee 2, assuming we are using PHITS code. This result is for MCP code. Unfortunately, for MCP, MRCP, this mesh type reference computation phantoms is slower by 3 to about 20 times, depending on the particles and energies. And we think this is because the MCP code used the unstructured mesh geometry, which is very good, very flexible, but we think it's overly complicated to define the simple tetrahedral mesh. And I believe if the MCP code use dedicated geometry for tetrahedral mesh in the future, this problem will be addressed. So it's about the dosimetry impact. For this, we use the mesh phantoms, new mesh type phantoms, for those coefficients and calculate the values with the values of ICRP, the previous ICRP values, which were calculated using the current ICRP reference phantoms, Voxel phantoms. Also for some cases, stylized phantoms. This slide shows the lens dose coefficient for photon, and here you can see there is not much difference for AP direction, LAT direction, or ISO, not much difference. For PA direction, there is some difference when the energy is very low, but this is not really important in radiation protection. This slide shows the lens dose coefficient for electron, and again we see a similar result except for the PA direction and low energy. Again, this is not really important. This slide shows the effective dose coefficients for photon, and you can see the new mesh phantoms provide very similar dose values with the current ICRP reference phantoms. And the difference are really small, actually, usually less than 2% or 3%, with some exceptions at low energies. This slide shows the effect of those coefficients for neutron. Again, the mesh phantoms provide very similar dose values with the current ICRP reference phantoms. In this case, difference is a little bit larger, but still less than 20 to 30%, and it's not because of the difference in phantoms. It is because we are using different Monte Carlo codes. Okay, here this slide shows the effective dose coefficient for electron, and now we can see a big difference. Now the difference is like 7,000 times for AP direction. This this problem is solved by using another stylized phantom to mimic the skin. But if you assume ICRP does not use the stylized phantom and use just Voxel phantoms to calculate effective dose, then these are the difference we see. But this is because Voxel phantom, the current ICRP reference phantoms, these are Voxel phantoms. The skin is defined by about 2 millimeter thick voxels. So that caused the problem. And in mesh phantom, the skin is defined by 50 micron target layer, is very thin, and it's defined, and it caused difference. And this caused difference in skin dose, and that difference in skin dose caused difference in electron, but it is only for the electrons at low energies. So we analyzed this one. Anyway, the difference is very large, even though ICRP already addressed this problem using the stylus model. So we calculate for some radioisotopes, including C14, P32, strontium, and these are the differences. The differences for radioisotopes is less than 2 times, except for C14. C14 about 5 times, but it's not really important. If you have C14 outside the body, the external exposure is ignorable. So I can say the difference is less than 2 times. But for P32 and strontium-90, the difference is less than even 10%. So the current Voxel phantom actually provide correct values. This is for effective dose for helium ions, and we can see the similar trend, but now the difference is much smaller. So it's now about the dose coefficient for industrial radiography sources. Here, this time we used the mesh type reference computational phantoms, which were developed in our task group, to calculate the dose coefficient for industrial radiography sources, and these numbers will be included in our task group report. Then why industrial radiography sources? Well, according to IAE report in 1998, it's quite old, but still, industrial radiography sources account for about half of all the reported accidents in nuclear-related industry. And here you can see the industrial radiography device, and actually the source is very small. You can assume as a point source, and the source is iridium-192 and cobalt-60. And this is point source, so we decide to calculate this one. And this is an important case because we have many accidents from industrial radiography source. And we calculate those coefficients for some organs like red bone marrow, brains, and lungs. And these are the organs of interest. These are the organs of acute radiation syndromes. But we also calculate those coefficients for effective dose, and these values will be also provided. And those are for comparison purpose. Here, when you calculate the dose coefficient for industrial radiography sources, we use the mesh phantom. That is the reference size phantoms at least. But in addition to using the mesh phantoms of reference size, we also use non-reference size phantoms. That is to consider very small people or also very large people. We produced and used, for example, 10th percentile phantom, which corresponds to 10th percentile in height and 10th percentile in body mass. And this phantom was produced to represent a very small person. And also we produced 90th percentile phantom to represent a very large person. So when we calculate those coefficients for reference person, we also calculate those coefficients for a small person and large person. And I'm not gonna explain the procedure in detail, but basically what I can say is that we modified, we scaled the current mesh type reference computational phantoms to 10th percentile and 90th percentile dimensions. And that is the beauty of mesh phantoms. You can easily change the shape of mesh phantom for adjustment. And the middle one is the MRCP, that's mesh type reference computational phantoms, which were developed in our task group. And the left one is 10th percentile person, which represent a small person. And the right is 90th percentile phantom. These two phantoms were just produced from the MRCP reference phantom. This slide shows the female phantoms, again the reference phantom, 10th percentile and 90th percentile phantoms. We also considered portraits. We also considered phantoms or peoples with non-standing postures. And for this, we produced some phantoms with some different postures. And in this case, we used some motion capture technology. And basically, one of my students, he's one of my students, and took this motion capture device and take any posture, and the sensors take his posture, and we use the information and to produce phantoms. Right now, it's not fully automated process, but we are trying to make it automated process right now. And these are the phantoms with the different postures, sort of like walking position, sitting, squatting, or bending, and kneeling postures. And that is again the beauty of our new mesh phantoms. You can easily change the shape or postures of the phantoms. We considered total 60 source locations, and these 60 source locations were selected very carefully because we don't want to expand our calculation cases. And we considered 5 levels, like ground level, sources on ground level, middle thigh level, and also lower torso, middle torso, and upper torso levels. Directions, 4 directions we considered, and distances from 0.5 centimeters from the surface of the body up to 300 centimeters. So we are still calculating the numbers. We have some numbers, but not all. And the numbers will be provided in a table format like this in our task group report. But I just produced some pictures just for discussion here. This slide shows the dose coefficient, that is organ average observed dose per source integration, and this is for male small intestine for iridium source at lower torso level. And here you can see the black line, and black line is the root of reference size phantom, which is indeed the MRCP, that's mesh type reference computational phantom. And we can see the red values, and those values are from the 10th percentile phantoms, which represent a small person, and the blue line shows the values of 90th percentile phantom, which represent very large person. And for the front traction, when the source distance is very small, then we can see some difference, like 40% of difference for the 10th percentile phantom, and about 2 times of difference for the 90th percentile phantom. And we see those trends in right and left side, so front, right, and left, not in back. When the source is in the back, we don't see that much trend. It's because we don't have much adipose tissue in the back. And actually, it's for the female, we found very similar route, and the difference is a little bit less. And also we calculated for the cobalt male and female, and basically we saw very similar route. So here is the summary and conclusion. In our task room, the mesh type reference computational phantoms, MRCPs, for adult male and female have been developed to overcome the limitations of the current Voxel type reference computational phantoms. And the developed mesh phantoms are tested for compatibility with some general purpose Monte Carlo codes, like GENT for PHITS code and MRCP code, and also used to calculate some dose coefficients to see the impact of to see the dosimetry impact. And also these mesh phantoms were used to calculate some dose coefficients for industrial radiography sources, of which we considered different statures and postures. These phantoms we call are ordinal phantoms, including the thin target layer of the skin and the thin source and and target layers of the respiratory and elementary tract organs and the detailed organs. We call the all-in-one phantoms because now we can calculate all those coefficients for internal and external exposure only using these two phantoms. We don't have to use any additional stylized phantoms. That is why we call all-in-one phantoms. The developed phantoms are deformable, which can provide different statures and postures as necessary to calculate those coefficients for emergency exposure situations in ICRP. According to our plan, the developed phantoms will be released within about 2 years. So we'll try to get public consultation in 2018, next year, and we'll try to publish the report in 2019. And before I conclude my presentation, I'd like to emphasize that the new mesh type reference computational phantoms are an exact replica of the current Voxel type reference computational phantoms. The only difference is that these new phantoms, as mentioned before, these new mesh phantoms address the limitations of the current Voxel phantoms and provide the flexibility for future application. Thank you. Thank you very much.